James Walker had everything anyone could wish for: a flourishing business empire, a state-of-the-art penthouse high above the city, and a life that many could only dream of. His mornings unfolded like scenes from a movie, a quiet, pristine home with views that stretched across the glittering cityscape. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, James could see the hustle and bustle of life below, while he sipped his coffee from a finely crafted mug, his gaze fixed on the skyline. The sense of accomplishment he felt as he surveyed the world below was palpable. Life in that moment was perfect. The grand mahogany desk in his office reflected the success that James had built over the years. He had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the city. Everything seemed to be under control. He was proud of the life he had constructed, a life that symbolized wealth, power, and stability. His daily routine was flawless, and there was a calm predictability to his existence that he had come to cherish. But in the blink of an eye, everything came crashing down. As James was sipping his coffee, a sharp, urgent buzz came from his voice assistant, pulling him out of his thoughts. The tone was different this time, more serious than the usual morning updates. The assistant's voice echoed through the quiet room, breaking his calm demeanor. "Mr. Walker, there's been an incident with one of your cleaning staff. Mrs. Green, she's unconscious." The words hit James like a thunderclap. Mrs. Green had worked for him for years, and she had always been a model employee. She wasn't just a cleaner. She had become a fixture in his life, someone he trusted completely. Over the years, she had not only kept his home spotless, but had become an integral part of the household. Her presence was comforting, predictable, dependable, and always professional. He had never once had to worry about her. She arrived on time every morning, did her job quietly and efficiently, and left without any trouble. He had always seen her as part of the family, someone who had earned his respect and trust. James's mind raced as he processed the message. Mrs. Green was never one to show signs of illness or exhaustion. She was always sharp, always there when needed. This was not a regular scenario. Something had to be wrong. Something wasn't right. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his coat and rushed downstairs, his thoughts spinning in every direction. Was it a medical emergency? Did she slip? Or could there be something more to this? What had caused her sudden collapse? And why hadn't anyone noticed anything unusual before now? The hallway came into view as James hurried to the ground floor. When he arrived, his heart stopped. There, lying on the floor, was Mrs. Green, unconscious and motionless. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her shallow breaths were the only sign that she was still alive. Her body was sprawled unnaturally on the polished marble floor, a stark contrast to the flawless order of the home she had always maintained. Anne, his housekeeper, stood frozen beside Mrs. Green, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She looked as though she had just witnessed something unspeakable, her usual composure shattered. "Anne, what happened? Why is she unconscious?" James demanded, his voice trembling with concern. He could feel the panic rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed answers. Anne stammered, her voice shaky. I don't know, Mr. Walker. I came into the hallway and she was just there. She was cleaning, just like every other morning. Then I turned around and she collapsed. I didn't see anything unusual before that." James took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He crouched down beside Mrs. Green, carefully reaching out to check her pulse. It was weak, but there. His hands trembled slightly, his mind whirling. He couldn't understand. This was unlike anything he had ever seen. "Call an ambulance now," James ordered, his voice firm. But inside he was beginning to feel the weight of fear creep in. Why would someone who had always been healthy just collapse for no apparent reason? What could have caused this? As Anne hurried to make the call, James remained by Mrs. Green's side, watching her closely. The fact that she hadn't shown any signs of illness before made the situation even more perplexing. Could this be a medical issue? Something like a heart attack or a stroke? Or was there something more sinister at play? James couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to this than just a random health emergency. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The sirens of the ambulance grew louder as they neared, and soon the paramedics arrived. They quickly assessed Mrs. Green's condition, attaching monitoring equipment to her and checking her vital signs. One of the paramedics turned to James and said, "She's stable for now, but we'll need to take her to the hospital to run more tests. We can't say for sure what happened yet." James nodded, though his worry was palpable. He watched as the paramedics carefully placed Mrs. Green on a stretcher and wheeled her away. His thoughts were a blur of confusion, fear, and suspicion. What had happened? Why hadn't anyone seen anything out of the ordinary? As the ambulance drove away, James stood still, lost in thought. He had to know what had caused this. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple accident. Something was hidden beneath the surface, and he was determined to find out what it was. Mrs. Green had always been loyal and trustworthy. So why had she collapsed so suddenly? James was about to find out that the answers to those questions would lead him down a path he never expected. This incident was only the beginning of a much deeper mystery that would change his life forever. The paramedics had arrived swiftly, and within minutes, Mrs. Green was whisked away to the hospital. James watched the ambulance disappear down the street, his mind still spinning from the strange and unsettling scene. He remained frozen in place for several moments, unable to shake the image of her lying motionless on the floor. His thoughts spiraled in every direction. Was this just an accident? Had she suffered from a sudden medical emergency like a heart attack or stroke? Or could there be something deeper, something darker at play? Mrs. Green had always been a model employee. She was more than just someone who cleaned his home. She had been a trusted presence in his life for years. Her quiet, diligent nature had made her one of the most reliable members of his staff. She had no history of health issues, no indication of stress, and no signs of any personal troubles that might suggest an underlying issue. It made no sense that she would simply collapse for no reason at all. As the hours ticked by, James couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was far more than just a random medical emergency. The fact that Mrs. Green had collapsed without warning with no clear explanation gnawed at him. Something didn't add up. He had to know the truth, but how? Where did he even begin to unravel this mystery? Was it simply an isolated incident, or was it a piece of a much larger puzzle? His gaze drifted to the array of security cameras installed throughout the house. James had always been meticulous about safety, often going above and beyond when it came to surveillance. He trusted the system to keep his home secure and to provide valuable information if anything ever went wrong. Now it seemed that his own security measures might hold the answers he so desperately needed. Without wasting another moment, James accessed the footage from the cameras that covered the hallway where Mrs. Green had collapsed. His fingers trembled slightly as he navigated through the recordings, but his mind remained laser-focused. He knew that the answers were hidden somewhere in the footage. He just needed to find them. The video from the morning began to play. At first, it was just the routine activity of a quiet morning in his home. Mrs. Green walking down the hallway, carrying her usual cleaning supplies, moving from room to room with her typical precision. She looked calm and composed, just as she always did. But then something unusual caught his attention. Just before she collapsed, Mrs. Green stopped in the middle of the hallway. It was a small, almost imperceptible pause, but James had spent enough time watching his security cameras to notice the difference. Her movements were deliberate, as if she had seen or received something that caused her to hesitate. She glanced around, checking to see if anyone was nearby, then quickly pulled a small envelope from her apron pocket. James leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as the video zoomed in on the envelope. It was ordinary in appearance, plain white with no distinguishing marks or addresses. The kind of envelope one might receive from a friend or colleague, but nothing about it seemed out of place. Mrs. Green carefully opened it, unfolded the note inside, and read the contents. Her face, which had been calm and focused just moments before, changed in an instant. She seemed to recoil as she read, her eyes widening slightly. There was a brief, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands, and then, without warning, she collapsed. James froze the video, his breath catching in his throat. His heart pounded as he rewound the footage and played the scene again. The note had to be important. It was the key to understanding why Mrs. Green had collapsed, and possibly to the larger mystery unfolding before him. What was in that letter? Who had sent it? And why had it caused her to fall to the ground in such a sudden, dramatic manner? The scene was unsettling, but it provided him with a direction. The letter held the answers, he was certain of it. He needed to find it, now. Without wasting another second, James raced to the cleaning cart where Mrs. Green had left her supplies. His mind was racing as he scanned the cart, his eyes flicking from item to item. After what seemed like an eternity, his hand landed on the small envelope that had caused Mrs. Green's reaction. It was tucked between the cleaning rags, the plain white envelope now feeling far more ominous than before. James carefully opened the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. Inside there was a single sheet of paper with a short, cryptic message scrawled in bold, neat handwriting. "You know too much. Stay silent or you'll lose everything." The words hit James like a punch to the gut. He read the sentence again, his mind trying to process the implications. "You know too much." What did that mean? What had Mrs. Green gotten involved in? The message was a clear threat, one that left no room for ambiguity. Whoever had sent it wanted Mrs. Green to remain silent, to keep her knowledge to herself or else face consequences. The second part of the message, "or you'll lose everything," was equally chilling. It sounded like a warning, a threat designed to intimidate. James's mind raced as he tried to piece together the fragments of information he had. Mrs. Green had worked for him for years, and she had always been dependable, always kept to herself. What could she possibly know? What was she involved in that would lead someone to send her such a threatening message? And why had it been delivered so covertly, in the form of a simple envelope? James felt a sense of unease wash over him. He knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. The situation was far more complex than he could have imagined. Mrs. Green wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was tangled up in something dangerous, something that had clearly put her life at risk. The question now wasn't just about what had happened to Mrs. Green. It was about what she knew and who wanted to silence her. James couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was now a part of something much bigger than himself. And the storm that was brewing could very well destroy everything he had worked for. He had to get to the bottom of this, not just for Mrs. Green's sake, but for his own. The secrets were out there waiting to be uncovered, and James Walker was going to find them. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, James made his way to the hospital where Mrs. Green was being treated. Her condition had stabilized, but she remained in a state of confusion. Her eyes fluttered open when James entered the room, and for a moment it seemed like she didn't recognize him. The fear and disorientation in her eyes were palpable, and James felt a pang of guilt. She had been working for him for years. How had everything gotten so out of control? James pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat down. The sterile, quiet hospital room felt cold in comparison to the warmth of his home. He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "Mrs. Green, I need to know what happened. Do you remember what happened earlier? Do you remember what was in the letter?" She turned her head slowly toward him, her face etched with worry. She looked fragile, like a woman who had been through something far beyond her control. For a long time she didn't say anything. Her breathing was shallow, as if she was gathering the strength to speak. Finally she whispered, her voice barely audible. I was being threatened. Someone told me that if I didn't help them, they would hurt my family." James felt his stomach twist. He had never imagined that Mrs. Green, the quiet, reliable woman who had worked in his house for years, was being blackmailed or threatened in any way. She had always seemed like an innocent part of his life. How could anyone want to hurt her? "Help them with what?" James pressed, his voice steady but filled with concern. "What were you being forced to do, Mrs. Green?" Her eyes filled with tears and she turned her gaze away from him, clearly ashamed. "I didn't know what to do, Mr. Walker. I thought I was just cleaning your house, doing my job. I never knew what it would lead to. I never knew they were using me." James's mind was racing now. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture was still blurry. Mrs. Green wasn't just a simple housekeeper. She was tangled in something much darker, something far bigger than anything he could have imagined, and now her involvement in whatever this was had put her in grave danger. "What do you mean they were using you?" James asked, his voice growing more urgent. "Who is they, Mrs. Green? What were you involved in?" Mrs. Green looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. "My husband, Mr. Walker, he was involved with a group of people, a criminal network. After he died, I thought that part of my life was over. But I was wrong. They came to me saying they needed my help. They said if I didn't do as they asked, they'd harm my family. They said they had their eyes on me, that they knew everything about my life. I thought they were bluffing, but then they threatened my son. That's when I agreed." James sat back, his mind reeling. He had heard rumors about criminal syndicates operating in the city, but he never thought someone as ordinary as Mrs. Green could be involved. Her husband's past was clearly the key to this mess, but it was clear now that Mrs. Green had become an unwitting participant in a much larger game. one that was far more dangerous than anything she could have imagined. "So, they used you to gather information on me?" James asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "Is that what you were doing? Gathering information on me and other people?" Mrs. Green nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. I didn't know the full extent of it, Mr. Walker. I didn't know they were watching you too. I just thought I was doing my job, nothing more. They made me keep an eye on you, on your meetings, your visitors. They made me report things back to them. I didn't know it was going to turn into this. I had no idea they would hurt me if I refused." James clenched his fists in frustration. He had trusted Mrs. Green. She had been in his home for years, and he had never once suspected that she might be involved in something so dangerous. Now it seemed that everything he had built was at risk because of a conspiracy that had been right under his nose the whole time. "Mrs. Green," James said, his voice softening, "you're not to blame. You were trying to protect your family, but we need to figure out who is behind this and what they want from me. Do you know who they are? What do they want with me?" Mrs. Green looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and regret. "I don't know much, Mr. Walker. They've been so careful, but I think they're after something from you. Something you have. I don't know what it is, but they've been watching you for months. They said they would make me pay if I didn't comply." James felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was still incomplete. Mrs. Green wasn't just a housekeeper caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been manipulated and forced into this situation, and now, her life, and his, were at risk. Whoever was behind this had been planning something for a long time, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. James's mind spun with the implications. If this criminal network had been watching him for months, they must have known everything about his life, his business, his wealth, his connections. But what could they possibly want from him, and why had Mrs. Green been used as a pawn in their game? He had to find out the answers. He had to protect everything he had worked for, and he needed to start by figuring out who was pulling the strings behind this conspiracy. The storm in his life had only just begun. James left the hospital room with a new sense of urgency. He had been living in the safety of his success for so long, never questioning the stability of his life. But now everything had changed. The life he had worked so hard to build was hanging by a thread, and it was all because of one woman's unwitting involvement in a dangerous game. As he left the hospital, James realized one thing above all else: this was only the beginning. The storm had just begun to gather strength, and he wasn't sure if he was prepared for what was coming next. But one thing was certain: he would uncover the truth no matter the cost. And when he did, the storm that had taken over his life would either break him or make him stronger than ever before. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories like this one. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think will happen next to James Walker? Would you have acted differently? Let us know.